Good morning. Good to see you all here this morning. My name is Renee Buckland, and I am your worship partner today. I want to welcome you to Westminster, and I also want to welcome D.L. Helfer, who is our preacher this morning. Reverend D.L. is a non-binary and in general avoids boxes, which traps them into this or that. Instead, they search for possibility, for deeper truth, and share those glimmers of possibility with others. Reverend D.L. is presently pursuing a master's of social work and serving as a hospital chaplain. They hail from Southern California and now call Providence home. I don't know why. They share that home with their beloved partner and their 20-year-old cat. We're glad to have D.L. with us. The chalice is a symbol of our faith, and our chalice lighting marks the beginning of our worship service. I will light mine and share our reading. Then I invite you to light yours if you have one. And if you like, you can use the chat to post the name of the street where the chalice was lit. Uh-oh. Hold on, technical difficulties. Our chalice is a reminder that in hard times, our ancestors in faith acted with courage to bring hope and safety, to bring life itself to threatened people. We light it this morning as a reminder of who we are called to be in a world still dangerous and despairing. With courage and faith, we bring ourselves to the work before us.
Morning. It is good to be with you this morning. I'm going to start just for a moment on a light note. If you look at the square titled Mimi Budnick, you can see the 20-year-old cat in the window watching the sermon, decided to join us this morning. So our opening words are titled Who We Are Called to Be. Our chalice is a reminder that in hard times, our ancestors in faith acted with courage. They worked to bring hope and safety, to bring life itself to threatened people. And we lit it today as a reminder of who we are called to be in a world still dangerous and despairing. With courage and with faith, we bring ourselves to the work before us.
Please join us in our opening hymn. Now let us sing number 368 if you're using a book.
1, 2, 3.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the faith within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your
Be not
voice.
afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
hope
sing.
within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
hope
sing.
within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your
Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
love
sing.
within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
love
sing.
within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your
Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
joy
sing.
within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
joy
sing.
within.
Lift up your voice.
Lift up your
Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the joy within. Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
faith
sing.
within.
Now let us sing.
Sing to the power of the
Sing,
faith
sing.
within.
Lift up your
Lift up your
voice. Be not
voice.
afraid.
Be not afraid.
Now let us sing to the power of the faith within.
Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within.
Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within.
Please join us in our unison affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church and service our mission. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Here in the community, we are here for each other in a whole host of ways. And one of the particular ways we can support each other is by being present in what is good and what is hard in our lives. I invite anyone who would like to take a moment, if you would like to share something in your heart this morning on the chat.
Into a spirit of meditation. Maybe find your feet firmly on the ground or your back against something. Maybe lower your gaze or close your eyes. I haven't really gotten into the meat of today's worship yet, but it's about the need to protect trans lives. And these words are in that direction. It's the words of Jess Reynolds, titled A Prayer for My Queer and Trans Siblings. Here you are in this holy space, on this ground that is holy because you are here. Here you are in flesh and in bone, filling up this body that belongs to you alone. Your pumping heart is a wonder because it keeps you alive. Your loving heart is a blessing because it keeps all of us alive. The spirit of love has a home in you. May we all see that love in you and let our hearts become mirrors for the compassion at your core. The spirit of justice has a home in you. May we light our wicks from one another until we are all aflame, until we burn out every prejudice we carry in these bones. Here you are, holy as you are. Blessed be.
Here at Westminster, we share our plate 50-50 with an organization whose mission aligns with our values. Our April recipient of Share the Plate is Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders provides impartial medical relief to the victims of war, disease, and natural or man-made disaster, without regard to race, religion, or political affiliation. The organization provides medical aid where it's needed most, independent, neutral, and impartial. The other half of the offering goes to support all the other good work of this community. You can donate using the link that is now being put in the chat. The offering will now be given and received with gratitude.
When I came out as transgender, a decade or so ago, I whispered the words. I was filled with such shame at my truth that even in my Unitarian Universalist congregation, the one in Long Beach, California, that I attended at the time, I couldn't turn up the volume high enough to claim those words. I am transgender. And I knew what it meant, but I really had no idea what it meant. Here's what I did know. I knew my marriage would end. I knew I'd have to explain to justify myself to person after person in my life, managing their grief, anxiety, judgment, fear, not understanding, managing all of that while trying to follow my own inner truth. I knew that society can be harsh and judgmental, and that whatever period I spent changing my voice, my appearance, my body, that it would be at best an uncomfortable time, and at very worst, a dangerous one. But there was a lot I didn't foresee on this journey. It was a shock when the job I had lined up, a ministry role in a hospital, was rescinded. And I was told my lack of being clearly male or female would be too much for the patients to bear. I didn't know that my changing body, something that I was still trying to get comfortable in, would be such a focus of fascination to those who barely knew me, that utter strangers would feel free to ask about what genitalia I do or do not have, as though they have a right to inquire or speculate. I was shocked again and again by the complicated recognition as my appearance became more masculine that society treats me so much better than it ever did than when I was clearly female. And this isn't to say there weren't benefits. There are. I had no idea of the kindness of friends, the ones who would stand by me, loving me, even if I had to figure out how to love myself again in my changing body. It was a surprise to me to find out how much I loved myself in a way I never had before. And I was happy too that love still existed for me in the world, that as I claimed myself, that love emerged. Turns out too that I have a whole lot to say and I've lost my fear of saying it. That, my friends, is all thanks to gender transition. But my experience is hardly universal. As you've heard in my introduction, I'm currently pursuing a master's of social work. There's many reasons for this, but at the core, it's about watching the reality of trans youth deal with society's judgment, with challenges to one's being, from safe and non-judgmental medical care to appropriate mental health support, to the opportunity to find work and housing without discrimination, and the list goes on. And let me be clear, being trans means dealing with all of this on some level for the rest of one's life, although what one has to deal with varies widely. As part of my MSW, I've spent the last year interning at Youth Pride here in Providence. If you don't know it, it's a safe space for LGBTQ+ children, youth, and young adults. It has more than a dozen weekly programs, case management, a clothing pantry, a food pantry, and so much more. And when I began there, I thought, do we really need this space? Haven't we evolved and grown? Aren't we more accepting than we once were? And the answer when I got it was, of course, a both and, yes and no. Yes, for many things are better, but for many they're worse. And trans and non-binary youth still desperately need safe spaces, all of which tells me that there's work to be done. I've met with exceptionally few trans youth, for example, that aren't dealing with housing insecurity. It took me a little while to understand why this is. Here's why. Most trans youth are still out of the house before adulthood, either because they've been pushed out actively or because the requirements to stay means they don't actually get to name who they are. So this means trans youth find themselves out in the world too early without the maturity or sense of self to navigate that. That in turn results in housing challenges. This all means a young trans person's life is all too often essentially too challenging at a time when they're still trying to figure out their gender. And this is what I've come to. We're setting them up to fail. And this is often a difficult conversation in UU congregations because we have worked to be welcoming congregations and we do want to be inclusive. But I don't know if you all realize that Trust, Trans UU Religious Professionals, one of our organizations, did a survey a couple of years ago. And what they found is in the very vast majority of UU congregations, trans individuals do not find themselves to be really accepted as they are. I can't tell you how many of them didn't even have their basic pronouns heard and accepted. And I can't tell you still as minister how many times I've heard they, them is not grammatically correct, as though that's the measure of one's gender. There is a pervasive bias that exists, and I carried it right up to the beginning of my transition. I had to work through my own internalized bias. But the number I come back to again and again is trans women of color die on average at 35 years old, 35, because of violence. If this was any other group, we'd be throwing resources to try to save them. And none of this is meant to hold you specifically responsible for this, of course not. But I'm just trying to emphasize the scale and the scope of the bias. And you add to that 4 years of Trump and all of that he put through during that time to further make our lives difficult. Most troublesome right now is that laid the groundwork for anti-trans legislation that's happening in state after state. Alabama just this week passed laws so egregious that doctors, nurses, medical providers will be charged with a felony if they provide trans affirming care to anyone. Laws that make it difficult, everything from bathrooms to school sports to changing our names to getting surgery to you name it. And if I'm honest, I think that it's going to get worse before it gets better. I want you to get that because it means not for me, but for any youth, for any young adult, for any person of that age that is seeking sanctuary. If they walk into a UU congregation, you are their place to call home. You are a place where they can potentially feel so safe. I know I personally walk into this as a privileged trans person. I have economic safety, a good job, racial privilege, positional privilege. I'm the one with the mic this morning. And so many forms of protection, but I'm the anomaly. I know so many people suffering simply because they're trans or non-binary. They can't get through the day-to-day of their lives. They can't get housing, they can't get work, they can't be safe. So when I was coming out trans myself and I kept hearing, "You're so brave," I cringed because I wasn't brave. I was doing something I had to do. If I had any other choice, I wouldn't have done it. It would have been easier to stay happily in a female body. At least the world would understand and not judge. But it turns out, not for me only, but for everyone, that claiming one's truth in a hostile world is an act of bravery. Again and again, We all say in some form, this is who I am. I'm not apologizing or justifying it for you. It's hard to walk through the world as the other. For me, it's the most freeing thing I can imagine to live into that truth. And I want to come to the religious portion of this service because that's what faith calls us to. If you're a person that reads scripture, any scripture, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, it's all stories of people encountering difficulties, having a revelation, and going forth changed. We gather every Sunday morning with just that in mind, that there are parts of ourselves, all of us, unclaimed, to be healed and to be loved. And I went back to the story of Adam and Eve, because that choice is made clear from the very beginning. You know the story, I'm sure. God says, here's paradise, but you have to live within my rules. You can't seek knowledge. You can't know freedom. I get to say who you are. If you will do all of that, I'll take care of you. This is a terrible offer, and Eve knows it from the outset. Because who wants to live in this beautiful bubble? Or as Eve did, say, I know there's so much more outside those doors, but I'll lose everything if I go there. There's a poem that I love that says this better than I ever can. Poem Ansel Elkins. Wearing nothing but a snakeskin, I blazed a footpath, the first radical road out of that old kingdom toward a new unknown. When I got to those great flaming gates of burning cold gold, I stood alone in terror at the threshold between paradise and earth. And there I heard a mysterious echo, my own voice, singing to me from across the forbidden side. I shook awake, at once alive in a glaze of fire. Let it be known, I did not fall from grace. I leapt to freedom. My friends, that's why we gather, to seek freedom. Freedom from the fears that hold us back, that have us say no when we'd rather say yes. Freedom from those that judge us and maybe even hate us, solely for claiming more of who we are. Freedom from the notion that puts people in boxes, in walled gardens, forcing us to choose between safety and a life fully lived. I can't imagine a choice other than freedom. So I urge you that are not of the transgender community, and I'm guessing that's most of you, to make it known that you stand by their side, by our side, and that you're ready to fight for their rights as much as your own. In the words of transgender icon Marsha P. Johnson, history isn't something you look back and say it was inevitable. I ask you to join me in fighting for a world that holds the transgender community as dearly as they were held in the very best of times. We can and we must create a world in which we all know safety. Blessed be. Our closing words today are from the Reverend Teresa Ein Soto. They write, all of us need all of us to make it. And I want you to get used to those words, make them your prayer. All of us need all of us to make it. And I invite you to say it with me. You don't have to unmute. All of us need all of us to make it. In a world where we're targeted for struggle, where some benefit and flourish, where others meet brutality, please pray with me. All of us need all of us to make it. In a world where powerful people of ill will and indifference make us fearful for our safety and our futures, please pray with me. All of us need all of us to make it. And in that space between seeing and naming, between hearing and changing, please pray with me. All of us need all of us to make it. Blessed be.